Coming up next on the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Man, those little towns around Rockport and Aransas Pass, man, they have got the best seafood down there. It's very reasonable. And then you can just pop in any little bar down there and you might hear a Stevie Ray Vaughan type guitar player. And that's a fun trip. You can rent a SUV in any of the airports and throw in 2 or 3 buddies and off you go. And you could do a week down there for about $600.
That was Brian O'Keefe taking us into Texas, doable destinations, photography tips, and Idaho today on The Swing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how's it going today? Thanks for stopping by the show. One quick way to support this podcast is to share out a previous episode that you've loved, and you know somebody who would also love to get that information and check out that podcast. Share it out. Really easy to do in whatever app you're using right now. Today's episode is sponsored by Zag.Fish, who creates ethically sourced premium fly tying materials with their 5D brushes. These are the Fairflies brushes that we've talked about before. Zag.Fish is the place you can go to pick up Fairflies products and the other stuff they have going on in the fly tying niche. 5D brushes contain the perfect proportions to tie great streamer, bass flies, saltwater flies, and we're going to be using some of these flies even more as we do some of these saltwater trips. You can check out Zag.Fish right now by heading over to wetflyswing.com/Zag. That's Z-A-G. We're also sponsored by Togens Fly Shop, who has superior quality products, great prices, and a great YouTube channel. You can check them out right now by heading over at either Togens Fly Shop on YouTube and check out the new videos they have this week, or you can go directly to Togens at wetflyswing.com/Togens, and they'll help you get started. Whether you're just beginning, they've got some training tutorials in fly tying, or if you've been tying a while, they've got a good selection of materials and some unique stuff over there. Check them out right now, Togens Fly Shop. Brian O'Keefe is back on the podcast with an update on his traveling adventures. We discover and hear about what his Iceland trip was all about and how that went down. We get a little rundown on his top destination trips that we should all be thinking about. We kind of get a top 10 list here. And we go back and we hear about why he moved to Idaho. He left Oregon and went to Idaho, and he's loving the move out east. And we talk about that today. So lots of good stuff. Brian was on the podcast quite a while back, and we're going to get a nice little check-in on his travel and everything he has going on right now. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here we go. Brian O'Keefe.
How's it going, Brian?
It's going great. Enjoying my new digs in eastern Idaho.
Oh, eastern Idaho. Did you make a move?
Yeah, I was in Central Oregon forever. I moved there in 1975, and it was basically utopia. It was just great, uncrowded skiing, nobody at boat ramps or on the lakes. But, things changed. People move around, and Bend grew. And as it grew, I moved a little farther out of town, and I was up on the Metolius for a while, and in the little town of Sisters, and then over by the Crooked River, and then I made a move to far eastern Oregon, right on the Snake River border with Idaho, and
oh wow,
was 20 minutes from the Owyhee River, which is quite well known for its brown trout fishery, and then just 4 minutes to the Snake River to a boat ramp, which had fantastic smallmouth bass fishing, and then there were desert reservoirs and other streams out in that area, and that's kind of during the main COVID, say 2 years of COVID, and it was a great place to hunker down. Just a nice little agricultural community, and year-round fishing and a little bit of skiing. So I was over there for a couple of years, and then the house I was renting was sold during the quote boom, and I started looking for other places in the area. There was just nothing. Either rents were incredibly high, or there just wasn't anything. And so I looked and broadened my search, and pretty soon, I had this sort of magnetic pull to get back to places I would road trip to fish, like the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake and the Madison. And I started looking in eastern Idaho, and sure enough, and Dave, I kind of live a trout
Yeah.
bum lifestyle.
I know.
I don't have to have a big foundation, big house or anything. I like kind of being mobile. So I found a nice little spot outside of Rexburg. And so I'm 15 minutes from the South Fork of the Snake, about 25 minutes to the Teton River, and a half hour to really good water on the Henry's Fork. And then just a little farther would be Hebgen Lake,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Madison. Henry's Lake is really fun. You probably saw that picture of that, 20-pound cutthroat.
Oh, yeah.
That just broke the state record. That was amazing. And so I've even got a good bass lake. And so this is home now. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of like Central Oregon in a way. The winters are kind of long, but, I can work basically anywhere there's internet. So nothing's really preventing me from maybe heading to a little bit slightly warmer place with either some bass or some redfish or who knows what. But
Yeah.
yep, I might be 68 years old, but I'm still a trout bum.
Wow. That's awesome. I love it. So you're still going for it. And so I love it. It's Eastern Idaho too, because I've been talking to a few people. I've been through Idaho many times and fished out there, and it is a cool place. It's kind of tucked in the middle, right? You've got all these, it's surrounded by, Montana and Wyoming and Utah and all these states, but you got this, like, what is it about Idaho you think that makes it kind of cool and unique?
I think there's just so much water in this area, and there's some things that make it unique that aren't very good. I mean, politically, it's not exactly my cup of tea. This isn't necessarily my tribe, but I'm more in the fishing community anyway, and they tend to trend in different directions. But, as you mentioned, if I just drive an hour and a quarter east, I'm in Wyoming, and an hour and a half, I'm in West Yellowstone, Montana. And then there's dirt roads that, even locals don't know about that just take off from other Forest Service dirt roads. And you can drive into Yellowstone on a dirt road and be in absolute backcountry. And there's cool little streams in there. Or you can take a dirt road up over the Continental Divide into Montana. And there's streams and lakes over there that are really off the beaten path, So I think the most unique thing is that my hardest thing is where to go, because there's so many choices. And even though we're having nighttime, this is, kind of late October. So we're having nighttime temperatures even in the low 20s. But if it warms up to 38 to 40, there'll be blueing olives, and there's always streamer fishing. And, it's interesting because let's take the salmon fly hatch, because in Oregon, our famous salmon fly hatch is the Deschutes, and then parts of the Rogue River. And generally, it's pretty, once you get it dialed in, kind of where it begins down maybe by Maupin and moves upriver to Warm Springs and lingers in certain areas a little longer. But over here, when you have 4 or 5 rivers with a salmon fly hatch, the timing's all different. So you might be on the lower South Fork of the Snake at first. Then you might move up to the Teton in the old Teton Dam area, the dam that blew out. And then you got to hit the Henry's Fork by Ashton. Then you might come back to the South Fork of the Snake, going up the canyon towards Palisades. And
so there's more diversity.
Yeah, it's the timing that, you need to live here 30 years to really understand that kind of timing specifically to a hatch. And that would apply to green drakes and PMDs and things like that too. So I've fished over here since I had a driver's license, but I always hopped around. I'd go fish the Owyhee, then the South Fork of the Boise, then the Lost River, then the Beaverhead, and loop around to the Madison and the Henry's Fork, and then go home. And hitting a river for a day or two once a year, that's a wonderful thing in itself. But you don't accumulate that intimate knowledge of a watershed, the hatches, the whether rivers are high, medium, or low, what to do when. So it's actually fun to be, kind of in a beginner mode.
That's what you feel like.
Yeah, I've got some skills and I got tons of gear, but I have to learn the timing, and that's really fun because I don't like to be a one-trick pony. I've always skied or windsurfed or did other things. And so it's fun to be in that learner's curve of a new hobby, a new sport, any sort of recreation. And I kind of have that here a little bit. And it's fun to crack the code on stuff that you hadn't done before. Like right now, is the Pseudo. It's not necessarily a blue wing olive, but people call it a Pseudo blue wing olive. And it's a tiny, almost half a size larger than a trico, smaller than most blue wing olives. And it's a tricky hatch. It's very sporadic. And you got to be in the right spot on the right day. And the fish get so selective because it's an interesting little mayfly. It comes off the bottom, and as it emerges, it actually hatches out of the nymphal shuck underwater and is literally a swimming dun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even if it hatches just an inch or two below the surface, it's still drifting downriver as a sunken live adult, climbs out through the surface film, and then off it goes. And so I fished last night. Well, I shouldn't say last night because night is now about 6 o'clock, but late yesterday afternoon till almost dark, beautiful sunset. And, I tied up this fly. It's just very simple. It's a small little olive biot body on a size 20 hook, and just a little tiny tuft of gray marabou to imitate an adult wing underwater, so it was kind of a, back in the day, they used to have this fly called a Flymph.
Oh yeah, the Flymph. That was a Hayfleece. Or was that Hayfleece fly? One of those guys.
Yeah, it was kind of half dry, half wet, And
Yep.
so this is actually a match the hatch, pretty cool deal. I use a spotter fly, like a high vis parachute blue wing olive in about a 16, something I can see in this low light. And then
so that'll be your indicator, like a dropper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then 3 feet of 6X to this, and sometimes 7X to this little ascending dun. I really don't know the proper word for it, but yeah, we kind of cracked the code last night on it with 3 or 4 good fish. And so someone like myself who's fished since they were 8 years old and had I think we talked about this last time, was my granddad was a strict dry fly purist, bamboo rod, silk line, all that stuff. So I've been fishing a long time and pretty serious about it, not just here and there. So it's fun to do something new and actually be going back to the vise and tweaking stuff. And so I'm sort of a kid in the candy shop here with so many different opportunities. And
it's amazing. Is the dry fly are they still to you the most challenging kind of technique, or are there other, when you compare it to like wet flies or streamers or any of the other stuff or whatever, nymphing?
Yeah, yes and no, in that some dry fly fishing is pretty darn simple. You get on a nice PMD hatch in a riffle, you could be on the South Fork of the Snake, the Missouri, anywhere. And that's not too technically difficult. You can fish upstream or at least side stream quite a bit. Got to be able to cast okay and put the fly within a foot of where the fish is probably holding, on its drift. But then when you get into more reach casts and downstream slackline presentations, I mean, that's just a blast. You're definitely probably working a fish that's got a little more river savvy than say just a riffle fish. But at times, fishing emergers and some nymphing can be very challenging, very technical, because the fish has got a pretty good look at your fly. Up on the surface, it's kind of bouncing around. There's light sparkling off it and stuff. So, and then streamer fishing has its challenges too, because sometimes it's difficult because of wind or longer casts. It's more of it's a little more Bubba than dry fly fishing, but it has its place.
Yeah.
So,
so you do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I think it's half the fun is really having the right cast, being in the right position. The subtle things, because if you go with a guide, you don't know all the time that he's actually positioning you as a wading angler or as a boat angler in exactly the right spot to make perfect presentation. You're not just randomly dropping the anchor or like, oh, there's a fish, cast. He's going to put you in a spot so you can make a reach cast, shake a little slack on it, or high stick, or whatever technique you're using. And so I think it's kind of fun just to be always using, fly fishing is kind of a mental game. It's physical. We've all kind of slipped off a trail or tumbled or fallen in. I mean, it cracks me up when people say, "Oh, you like to fish." I don't. I'm just not that patient. And I always think, patience. Patience is an ingredient for probably a lousy fisherman. So
Right.
I like to kind of get after it and wade and
That's true.
and just
I know.
work all the puzzle pieces, whether it's position, fly, tippet, type of cast, type of drift, and that all just comes together. Because if you play tennis or golf, and someone says, "Oh, I play tennis," and they just doink the ball back to you with a high lob, bonk, bonk, bonk.
Oh, right.
That's just not fun. You play with someone who hits it hard, and
No, you got to whack it.
yeah, that's when tennis becomes fun. Otherwise, it's just kind of hitting a ball. And golfing, when you're always looking for your ball or it's out of bounds or in someone's yard, I mean, then it's frustrating and not much fun.
Yeah.
But when you actually kind of get the hang of it and keep it in the middle, golf is sort of fun. And I think that's kind of how fly fishing is. It's sort of a weird, funky sport. I got this long rod and this weird line, and you don't really cast the fly, you cast the line. But when it also comes together, basically through casting and some time on the water and fly selection, then you kind of, you up your game, and it's really more fun. And then I think after that, you look for challenging situations. That's why a lot of people who have fished all over, you might see them in an airport or somewhere. Where were you? Oh, I was down in the Yucatan fishing for permit, because that person needs that challenge, and it's fun. The Henry's Fork is just like that. There's days where, you're like a hot windless day. In the summer, you're looking for a few fish, and then, no 2 days are the same. You might be up there on a cloudy day and green drakes are popping and you see 100 rising fish. So
that's on.
I'm kind of rambling, Dave. I hope you're keeping up with me.
No, this is good. Well, let me just first start. I'm going to take it back. Just episode 78 was the episode we had you on a while back. We'll put a link to the show notes there. But I did want to touch base. I mean, I think it's interesting to me, like you said, kind of off air, you kind of received an email from somebody who was, asking about this life you have, and it is pretty cool that you've been traveling. I'm curious with what you've been doing. Now you're in Eastern Idaho. Do you find yourself now, as you mentioned, you're 68, kind of, not doing as much travel or not liking it as much as you get a little bit older? Because you're looking that you said, right, 1960s was when you were like getting started on this. How has that looked over time? Are you just 100% go still?
Well, I'm definitely go on fishing, and it doesn't really matter. It can be bluegills, smallmouth bass, pike. It doesn't matter. I love it all. Still traveling quite a bit. I work for 11 Angling. It's part of 11 Experience. And so we've got these really cool lodges in Iceland and Chile and New Zealand and Colorado, and looking at new places all the time. So, there's sort of forms of traveling. I suppose one would be just vacation, having fun, going on fishing trips. And then my kind of travel also, which is sort of work related, which was even before working for 11 and doing Catch Magazine with Todd Moen. We were traveling to make videos and produce photo essays for the magazines, and that's kind of work, and it's even a little bit stressful when you got a kind of a big expensive project and the weather is horrible, or there's some sort of other high water issues, or if you're doing steelhead or salmon and the fish just aren't there. So I do a lot of work fishing and fishing trips, and still you won't hear me complain too much. I've the opportunity right now to go to some pretty amazing spots, and there's definitely work to do, and there's definitely some responsibilities, but
what is that work when you're doing that? What is the you're going, I always think of like hosted trip. Is that kind of what this is, or what does that look like with 11 Angling?
I don't do a lot of true hosted trips. I will support magazine editors and writers. So in Chile last year, I was with Ross Purnell of Fly Fisherman. And then, good working relationship with Tom By at the Drake. And then in about a month, I'll be heading down to New Zealand to Cedar Lodge with the fishing editor of Gray's Sporting Journal. And so those aren't technically hosted trips, but they're sort of partnerships where, we want them to have a great trip, get great photos, and then they'll produce obviously nice articles. And that's pretty fun. And looking forward to that trip. And then, so I'm mostly still doing photos, but when you're taking an editor somewhere, you work on logistics, make sure everybody gets, the right flights and all that stuff. But so not as much travel, and just sort of bumming around the Bahamas or Mexico as I used to. And you asked me if I like to travel. I said, well, I do when I get there, but I don't know too many people who enjoy the airport experience.
Oh, so yeah, that's it. Well, that's the question, because we've been getting into some of that now. It's been pretty cool this year and last year, and now even more next year. And I kind of do love all ends of the travel. You know what I mean? Even sometimes the airport. You know what I mean? Like, just it's that experience out there. But and of course, getting there. That's why I love talking to you here, because just hearing the background of you're just a little bit older than me, and hearing the experiences that you're still going strong. You know what I mean? That's pretty awesome. And do you look, as you look ahead out, say the next 5-10 years, do you see yourself kind of just continuing? Obviously you never know where this goes, but doing the same thing and kind of still traveling?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Currently, the way I work, and I work remote, anywhere I can get Wi-Fi, I can work. That is a great thing. And so, I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of photography, producing things that people take for granted, like their pre-trip information and a lot of logistics. A lot of that's minutia detail. You just have to work out, give it to our copywriter, give it to our graphic designers, let them then make printed materials, websites, blog posts, etc. Well, if you're doing a good job with the text and with the photos, it's sort of ageless. I mean, I could be 45, and because my people are all over the country, Bozeman, Colorado, Florida, etc. And so we never see each other face to face very often. And so, yeah, I'm 68, but if I'm getting the work done, I mean, it's sort of ageless.
Yeah.
I'd like to do it for as long as I like to. I love the people I work with. God, they're just talented. And it's kind of fun working with people in their late 20s and 30s who are just super energetic and going for it. So yeah. I just enjoy the company so much. I could just keep doing this. And
yeah,
I don't know too many people that say that about where they work when they're ready to retire. I think most people are ready to hang it up. And
yeah, exactly, hang it up. That's what's cool about what you're doing, because it's like the retiring thing. I think maybe it was different a while ago, but now it's kind of like, retiring's kind of just old stuff, right? Like, why retire? I mean, just keep doing what you love.
Well, yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it. I feel kind of honored to work with the people I work with. They're just such cool people, and yeah, I'm going to keep it going for a while. It's fun.
Today's episode is sponsored by Country Financial. The fires in the Northwest and throughout the West in the last few years have been devastating for thousands of people. Some folks have lost their homes, their belongings, and their sense of safety has all been challenged. This is why insurance and protecting your assets are so critical. Dalton at Country Financial is here, and he was on the front lines during the fires, handing out checks to Country Financial community members, providing drinks, food, and more. And each time Dalton meets up with a client, he does an extensive review of their current assets and coverage. This is his opportunity to really decide and let you know what you need to make educated decisions for your insurance needs. This is a super critical piece, and Dalton Roy loves it. He loves getting out in the rural community, connecting with people, loves the outdoors, fishing, hunting, everything that goes with it. And so I'm excited to be sharing Country Financial and Dalton with you. The unexpected will happen, so it's always best to make sure your assets and life are protected. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/country right now to get started. That's COUNTRY. Check out Dalton and support this podcast and a great local company right now. Well, let's look. I just want to look back a little bit because I know we talked a little about on your past, kind of some of the trips. But when you look back at what you've done over the years and you've been all over the world, what do you think? You're working with 11 Angling now and all that experience. Are there a few trips that if you had to tell somebody like, okay, these are a few of the trips that you definitely have to go on? And everybody's different, but I think of myself, like, I just look at all these trips and I'm thinking like, man, I would love to go on every single one of these trips, but I can't. So if I had to narrow it down to a few, what would those be? What do you think for you? What would those be?
Yeah.
Is it a mix between salt and fresh?
Yeah. Another great question. I actually get a question like that quite often from people. It's maybe phrased into what's your favorite place or what's your favorite fish, which is
Yeah.
I don't really like that.
Yeah. Let's phrase it differently.
Yeah, you did. I like the way you did it because there's lots of options out there. And I suppose if you could call it like a generic bucket list.
Yeah.
I think as a fly angler, everyone should do sight fishing in New Zealand and, go with a guide and really get that technique figured out, the spotting, the stalking, making a good cast. It's not all that terribly difficult because you don't cast super far, and you kind of know the zone you need to have your fly land in, but you can get a little nervous, and pretty soon what your brain tells you to do, your arm with the rod doesn't always do it. So
right,
it's fun to kind of have that slight bit of pressure because you're not going to catch 20 fish a day. You're hoping for 3 or 4, but they're great and
big,
incredible fish, and so I think checking New Zealand off the box is really, really fun. And then jungle fishing, peacock bass, arapaima, other fish like that, golden dorado. So that's mostly South America. Yeah, that's pretty neat, and it doesn't,
for sure.
You don't need to do it every year, but maybe going after those 3 fish on 2 or 3 trips would be something to really accomplish. And I also would put generally the Patagonia region of South America, Argentina and Chile, just because it's kind of cliche. You hear it all the time. It's like Montana 50 years ago, but actually there's rivers that I've been fishing lately that are like Montana 100 years ago. And they really have no pressure. It's dry fly all day. You can probably get 50 eats a day. And it's the combination, kind of like New Zealand, where you have the amazing scenery, super nice people, great food, wine and beer.
Right.
And it's also in our winter, their summer. So
perfect. Yep.
I like that aspect too. And then there's still so much I'd like to do. I don't know if I'll ever get to it, but you've probably heard about, like the big pike in Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to do that. Yeah. Yep. And, oh geez, we've got a lodge in Iceland. So I never really thought I'd be an Atlantic salmon guy because it's sort of out of my price range, and I've lived on or near steelhead and salmon rivers my whole life. So, I've had a lot of that, but
Did you guys do that up there? Was that Iceland? Was that focused on Atlantic salmon?
Yeah. We've got a lodge that's got a river right in the backyard, and then 2 other that are leased because Iceland's all private property. There's no Forest Service or BLM. It's all farms or ice, and so you get your rivers and you get your lease there on them and stuff. And I found that Atlantic salmon were pretty cool. They're more playful than steelhead. They'll follow a fly, swirl on it,
kind of like summer steelhead more.
Yeah, 4 or 5 swirls. I've had fairly large salmon jump over my fly, big arc over the top of the fly, and then switch flies, change techniques, riffling hitch, and then you might get a grab on your 8th swing, and I just like that kind of cat and mouse game they play with you, and just being in Iceland, it's so spectacularly beautiful, and you don't see anyone around. That's just a great experience, and then there's sea run browns. In fact, on this last trip about 3 weeks ago, we fished this river called the Husi, and in one pool We got Atlantic salmon, chrome bright sea run browns up to about 4.5, 5 pounds, and resident browns. So,
Oh wow.
man, that's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's really fun.
Yeah. So Iceland's a big one. So you got, and you just talked, I mean, New Zealand, South America, Patagonia, Sweden, Iceland. I mean, those are 5 spots that are, all around the world that pretty much for sure that those are all, I mean, would you look at those? I mean, you've been all around Alaska too and North America. I mean, are there any trips around, I guess you could throw in Russia maybe there, but are there any trips around North America or closer to home that you think are at the similar level to those 5?
Oh yeah, there's great fishing all around the country, especially when you include salt water from Texas to Maine and parts of the Pacific coast. But for me, I've always wanted to spend some time on Lake Superior in that area.
Oh yeah.
Smallmouth bass and some big browns, and there's some carp flats, and I think the Great Lakes have just tons of opportunity from our side and the Canadian side. And I've just always been fascinated by the town. I've never seen it, but Thunder Bay, it's just such a cool sound. I'd like to look in that area a little bit. Michigan's got some fantastic fishing. I've fished bass, pike, and muskie a lot in Minnesota and the driftless area, Wisconsin. That's really interesting.
Yep.
But man, there's just good fishing everywhere. And who would think that here I am minutes away from the Henry's Fork that I would have a bass lake, at 35 miles away out in the middle of nowhere, dirt road, and it's just all cattails and reeds, and it's got huge bass, so I think every county in the country probably has some really good fishing, and it could be carp, it could be bass, it could be cutthroat trout, so we still have the most affordable country to fish in, really. Food, accommodation. Now, gas is a little different now, but
right.
But it's still the American fly fishing road trip is still one of the best fishing experiences in the world. And
what would be that road trip? I mean, I think about it, I guess, if you're on the west or the east, but what do you think that road trip let's take it there for a little bit. So now you've got, I don't know, a couple months, right? You say you take off in the late summer, fall, before the winter hits. What would that road trip look like for you?
Well, in the past, I've done a big trip every year, but it was for steelhead. So I would really go from the Canadian border to the California border and fish the western side of Washington and Oregon, the Olympic Peninsula, all the way down to Umpqua, to the Rogue, and then I'd circle back more of the inland rivers, like the Deschutes and the John Day and the Grand Ronde, and get up into Washington on the Wenatchee and the Methow when they're open, and sometimes hit the Clearwater in Idaho. But that's a wonderful fall trip. We just haven't had the runs of fish that could support that being a real fun and successful trip. Still, it's car camping or cheap hotels or a little camper trailer, and really a great trip. The fall colors are out, and it's just a great lifestyle. And
that's the West Coast. So you could pretty much everything you talk there is like West Coast steelhead. You could do that. You could spend months just doing that, right?
Oh yeah. And then Florida's got so much water on both coasts, and down in the Keys, there's still places to get out and wade and to paddleboard. And I'm kind of talking from more of a fish bum perspective.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Tons of guides and stuff, but
you can do the Grand Slam right down in Florida. You can go down there and get the big species down, and some huge tarpon.
Yeah, and there's just so many estuaries with snook and jacks and redfish. All that stuff is just great. And then the Texas coast. Well, let's just stop in Louisiana this time of the year for the big bull reds, and harder to do it yourself. It's definitely a boating scene, but there's a few spots that you can explore in a kayak, and then when you get down to Texas, that's great kayak fishing, and there's great wade fishing, and that goes all the way to the Mexican border. There's redfish the whole length of the Texas coast, and there's pockets of places where you'll find some tarpon, and there's pockets where you find some big jacks and things like that. But Texas is a very reasonable state to fish in. Hotels on the coast are fairly inexpensive. Food's great. I mean, you don't really hear about seafood and Texas going hand in hand. It's more of a steak and barbecue scene, but man, those little towns around Rockport and Aransas
Oh,
Pass,
nice.
man, they have got the best seafood down there. It's very reasonable. And then you can just pop in any little bar down there and you might hear a, Stevie Ray Vaughan type guitar player. And that's a fun trip. You can rent a SUV in any of the airports and throw in 2 or 3 buddies and off you go. And, you could do a week down there for about $600.
No
And,
kidding.
yeah.
Just cruise around Texas
Yep.
and just hit some mainly so what would you be if you went to Texas? What would be the species you'd be focusing on?
Probably redfish. And I have some friends who guide there, and some of the best guides in the world are in Texas. God, they're just the coolest people and great backgrounds, great history. But there's also these, canoe trails they have up in the estuaries, and they're sort of, marked with little poles in the water where you can keep going up through these places. But there's oyster bars nearby, and you'll see tailing reds, and you'll see nervous water, and you can rent a kayak or a canoe almost anywhere. And that's just a blast. That's just a fun trip. It's fun day and night. And
that's it. And then you got Texas, you got Florida, and then you can go up through the inner mountain west, right, and hit all everything like where you are now, right? You get into Idaho, Montana, you got all that, and then you mentioned the Great Lakes. That's a huge chunk.
Oh yeah.
And then we talked to somebody. We talked to Abbie Schuster here recently, and Martha's Vineyard, right? You go out to the coast. There's that whole thing, and it is pretty diverse. I guess you don't realize you start to think about the bucket list trips, and I guess the destination travel, do you think it's kind of focused on saltwater, or what's your take there? Do you think it's more leaning towards salt than it is the freshwater stuff?
Well, when you look at the big destination booking agents, Frontiers, Yellow Dog, Flywater Travel, the Fly Shop in Redding, their catalogs now are pretty diversified with salt and fresh, regional, national, and international. There's just something for everybody. And I mean, all those catalogs are websites you can just drool over them. My God, there's just so many great places. And I've been lucky because I've either been sent to a lot of those places by magazines and the actual booking agents to develop a library of photos for them. And so, but in my true heart, I'm a trout bum on a budget. And so, I use those catalogs and I look at spots, and then I might get on Google Earth and, there's a tiny little town there, maybe I can find a guy that'll rent a skiff or something. So I've done quite a bit of that. Cool. It's not as common as it used to be. Used to be able to get a little Boston whaler in the Bahamas, a 25 force outboard for $50, you could be, using Google Earth, finding little jungle streams or mangrove lagoons, and you could really fish cheap. It's still probably available, just a little harder to find, but I still have the mentality of doing it on the cheap, but I sure have had fun thanks to those companies I just mentioned of getting, the Kamchatka. And
have you been down? You've been down to Kamchatka?
Yeah, I did 2 rivers in Kamchatka. One was a float and camp, and the other one was a float with cabins. And just, it's everything you hear. The mousing's unbelievable. Yeah. Fishing Dalai Lamas for big rainbows. And, it's just like Alaska in a way that, have the same kind of weather, and you have big bears, and but you don't see any float planes, any other people. It's truly an amazing wilderness experience. And who knows when that will ever come back. But
so that's totally, that's still locked down completely, right?
Yeah, and I just think, morally, socially, that's the last place I'd want to go.
Yeah, that's right. Gotcha. Well, you mentioned photos. I wanted to touch on that a little bit. Are you still taking, is that still a big part of what you're doing out there? Are you taking lots of photos and kind of staying on that you got the website, obviously.
Oh, yeah. And my website's just a very crude, simple, self-made website. It's just a business card, basically. And, but yep, I'm still shooting pictures, love doing it. It's my favorite kind of companion hobby to fly fishing. And, I had my first picture published when I was 16. So I haven't really lost any energy of.
What was that one? Where was that published?
Oh, it was a black and white picture. I was in a rowboat on Dry Falls Lake in Central Washington. And I was in high school. And it was, black and white picture of me holding a brown trout, probably, finger in the gills, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And my buddy in the boat snapped a picture with I think it was a Kodak Instamatic, that old first point and shoot camera ever made. And from there, it just, went nuts. And, I have to admit, Dave, I use my iPhone a lot these days. And
the iPhone is a good tool these days, right?
Yeah, I'm ordering the 14 Pro Max today. And, I'm trying to kind of keep up with it. I used the iPhone 8 for a long, long time and sold covers and had hundreds of photos published in websites and, and different things. And half the time, I don't, if you send in a file of 40 photographs to a magazine, you don't write on which one was taken with an iPhone, which was taken with a pro Canon camera.
No idea.
They're just images. And you know what? People select a lot of iPhone shots and they may not work as well, blown up large, poster size or something, but man, they're so handy. And, I do presentations to fly clubs and I have since 1976. And the most popular presentation right now is one I do just on iPhone photography. And, it's just everybody's got one, or a smartphone of some kind.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's always in your pocket. And so it's always there. So you can capture just random, amazing, weather scenarios
and they're waterproof now too, for the most part, which is another bonus.
Yeah. If you can, I've cracked I think, if you crack your front screen or your camera cover, I don't know if they're very waterproof after that, but I'm hard on cameras. But
what does that look like? So I'm interested in this little presentation you do. So when you do, take us there a little bit on the presentation on the photography. What does that look like? Are you just giving kind of like 50 tips on taking photos with your phone?
Yeah, it's basically there are two or three things that I think are really important. One is don't torture fish. We don't all have to take a picture of every fish we catch and hold it inside a boat and have it flop around. That sort of stuff I address discreetly and not insultingly. And just try to, let's take your pictures from good to better to best and take care of our fish too. So I kind of start out with, and I invite people, whether it's over a Zoom meeting with a fly club or an in-person meeting, I just invite everybody, bring your phones, and have them in your hand. And we're all going to walk through this together and just go through the basic features and modes that are on a phone. It's unbelievable when you really dive down into all the filters and, all this stuff. I mean, we use, I suppose 90% of the time people use photo, just a standard photo. And then you can, like on a 13 that I have now, you can have the wide angle, the standard, and slightly telephoto. And if you've done that, you've noticed that your quality really goes down when you go up into the higher telephoto ranges, But so I go through all the features and, the different things you can do in portrait mode and slow-mo and just an automatic timer. And just tons of things, how your camera works.
Yep.
And then I go into just basic tips, not, pro photography lingo, just, hold your camera sideways, use your thumb on the volume button. That's your shutter. You don't always have to push the dot in the middle or down at the bottom to make the shutter click. You can use the volume buttons and you can hold your camera right at water level and then bring a fish up out of the net and you just bring it, 8 inches from the fish's face and click and then let it go. And it's a 1 second shot. And those are generally really quite nice, real low to the water, just 3/4 of the fish and off it goes. And then I get into things, and this is what I find super common among anyone who takes a picture is, let's say that the overall human population is about 5'10". Okay, so there's our average. Oh yeah, there's taller, there's shorter, but let's say 5'10". So everything we see all our lives is from that same perspective, that same elevation or height. And so consequently, it's kind of boring. And I like to look for little hills to get on, or stand up on a cooler in a boat to get some elevation, or then get super low right down to the water surface where we don't see that perspective every day. And that just makes pictures more interesting, I think. And, and so if a person is landing a fish and it's down there, he's generally made, if you're wading, a lot of muddy water where you're actually standing. If you're up at, I'm 5'8", say I'm taking a picture from 5'8", looking down at them, I'm just going to get a guy kind of squatting with a fish in muddy water. It's just not very pretty. But if you take a knee and put your phone at water level where your knuckles are actually touching the water, and you use the volume button to click from really low, then now instead of muddy water, I get the background, which could be right now fall colors, blue sky, white puffy clouds, and so just little things like that is taking your pictures from good to better to best. And and I don't mean being like a kind of an obnoxious movie producer type person, but just having your phone with you all the time. You can do some random little lifestyle photos and gear and part of the like truck travel and goofing off and
all the little
dogs
stuff
and things. It's fun stuff that you can just pull out your phone, put it in a dog's face, and boom, you got a cool shot. So
are you doing a lot of when you get back to like editing after you get them back on the computer?
And when I do a work trip, and shooting quite a bit, because I'm going to be shooting the lodge, the food, staff, equipment, boats, helicopters, whatever. There's a lot of photos to go through. And, in the film era, on a trip like that, I'd take, maybe 10 rolls of film, which isn't that much. It's 360 images. But, if you bought the best film available, and you had to send it into San Francisco to get it developed, and then you get it back, it was almost $1 a photo. So you weren't just clicking randomly on Motor Drive. You might only for a jumping tarpon or something like that, but you were pretty selective. But now it's a little more fun to experiment and try things because it's just a click away from deleting. But that being said, after a week on a trip, there's a day of editing for every day of shooting. And so, and it's just not deleting, it's sizing, so I make a web version, a print version of the same picture, and then I might crop it a little bit. I might take out a power line or something in the background, or a dot on the sky from some lens dust or something, who knows? But lots of editing time, and I'm not a big tweaker as far as a lot of color saturation or tint. I kind of like to use it as
keep it natural.
Keep it as natural as possible. I will brighten up a few shots that just kind of cloudy day doesn't have that punch, so I maybe bring up the brightness a little bit. And one thing I like to do, here's just sort of a tip, one thing I like to do this time of the year, especially with these beautiful fall colors. Anytime you have gold, yellow, almost reddish colors in a shot. On an iPhone, take the shot, and then I'll hit edit, and I'll swipe way across until I get to warmth, and it's way at the end. Okay, and I hit warmth, and I'll boost that up a little bit, and it really makes fall colors pop without looking unnatural. It just gives it a little more pizzazz. And that's a nice feature. And I can't do it on my pro camera, and I can't even really do it in Photoshop as well as what a iPhone can do. So the editing on an iPhone is really pretty cool. It has a sharpen tool and just tons of stuff. And if someone said, well, what are the 4 things that are super important in photography? First one is read your manual. Your camera manual will do so many things. And same thing with iPhones and phones like that. They just do a lot of different things. And
Are you going to get you probably just go on and get a tutorial too, right? Go on YouTube and find an iPhone 14 tutorial and just watch.
Yeah, everything. I do that every once in a while.
Yeah, because what is the camera? You look at these cameras; they've got like the 3 lenses, and maybe the 14 now has 4 lenses. I don't even know the tech, but that's something that's a big difference between the 8, right? Well, you said the 8. I don't think that had the 3 lenses on it, right?
No, no, it had that little skinny oblong lens, and so that technology is screaming at light speed forward, especially in the camera on these phones. I mean, really, my iPhone's a camera first and a phone second, and actually,
it's not even a phone. Do you even talk on the right? Sometimes we don't even talk on the phone anymore.
I know it. Texting and email. It's a lot of it. I noticed that people in my generation still love a phone call.
Yeah.
But my millennial friends,
yep,
they answer the phone like, "Hello."
Today's episode is sponsored by Drifthook, who has pre-packed fly assortments for every stage of your fly fishing journey. Each kit is organized by species and includes instructional videos and easy-to-follow guides. And I've got a few of these Drifthook fly boxes, and I can tell you from experience, these are super well organized. I've got a Euro nymph box, which I'm excited to dig into here as we start getting into the season here. And also there's a streamer box I have and some dry flies. And the cool thing is Drifthook organizes it, and their content they have on their website, which you can check out at drifthook.com, just goes through everything and really breaks it down. So if you are new, not sure what to grab, or if you just want to get some Euro nymphs or some streamers where everything's ready to go, you don't have to worry about choosing things. You can check out these boxes right now. These are fly shop quality flies, and they're hand-tied and inspected before being carefully packed into their durable, double-sided, water-resistant fly boxes. It's a good package, and it's worth the time to check it out, and check out Drifthook right now. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/drifthook. That's DRIFTHOOK. Grab a box and support this podcast and a great company with one easy click. Well, tell me this on your photography. So you've got the iPhone 14 coming. What's your camera, your actual, like the SOR? Do you still have that? And are you still, is that around?
Oh yeah, I still got a lot of that stuff. And it's great. It really is. It just is, compared to an iPhone that's bigger, heavier, harder to travel with, harder to be around water.
Not waterproof, right?
Yeah. I've been using Canon gear for a long time, but I'm not really, Chevy, Ford, Dodge. I think it's all great. I see beautiful stuff coming from Sony, but once you have a collection of lenses, it's pretty hard to make a big switch. So I'm going to ride the Canon thing for a while, but I think things are going to get smaller, lighter, more compact in the future. So those big cameras might be more of a studio type camera, not so much a traveling fishing bum camera, but quality is great, and they're fantastic.
Yeah. Are you on the Chevy Ford? Is that something like? Are you kind of a pickup sort of? What type of vehicle are you, like more of a van type or a pickup type guy?
Oh, on automobiles?
Yeah.
Pickup with a canopy. So, but I'm looking for a new canopy. I've got a 2005 Toyota Tundra that is indestructible.
Yeah, nice.
But they get horrible gas mileage, 13 miles a gallon.
There you go. Well, it hasn't got much better over the years. I mean, unless you get a hybrid or something like that, the gas cars are still getting about, pretty crappy mileage.
Yeah. I bought a little tiny, my friends call it my learner's permit car. It's a Chevy Aveo. It's a little 4-door, but it gets almost 40 miles to the gallon. It has these little tiny tires, a little bit bigger than my riding mower. But it's embarrassing to be seen in public, but I can put a 9-foot fly rod inside and zip up to Railroad Ranch on Henry's Fork and back and spend about, maybe a gallon and a half.
Right.
And in my truck, that would be a $40 trip.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I pretty much have to have a truck, and when you have a canopy, you're kind of got a camper. So
yeah, you do.
But I like to tow a boat, and the
Okay.
raft. And so, yeah, I need a
Yeah.
truck, and
Yeah.
you throw in chugger hunting or,
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
you do some bird
wandering.
hunting too.
Yeah, you just got to have really good, 10-ply tires and
Yeah.
sturdy truck, and you're good to go. I might even look in the future. Toyota's going to make an electric
Yeah.
Tacoma. That's kind of interesting. Don't know if I can afford it, but
I know.
um,
I know. My buddy just bought a hybrid Ford F-150 and they also have Ford has the electric F-150 now.
yeah, I've read about it.
Yeah, I think that's doing pretty good. So cool. So, and you do a little chukar hunting. So how's that? I mean, you're in there. I'd imagine Eastern Idaho is a pretty good place to be doing some bird hunting.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot of waterfowl and deer and elk and all that. But I'm in between. I'm not really an Oregon resident anymore. I'd have to buy a non-resident license. I haven't lived in Idaho long enough to be a resident to buy a resident hunting license. So I don't mind buying an out-of-state fishing license, which I have in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Yellowstone National Park. But hunting licenses are very expensive. So
Yeah.
I'll take a little break. Plus, I'm without a dog right now, and really chugger hunting without a dog is a great form of exercise, but not very productive, especially when you look at wear and tear on your body, on the dog, on your vehicle for an ounce of meat.
Yep.
So, if anything, when I get my license, I'll do some waterfowl hunting close by, and then pheasants are fun, and so I like to do all that, and but really hunting with some friends and having good dogs is where the magic is at, and so I have to kind of replace that now in my new location.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, let's take it out here. I had mousing. We've been trying to set up some trips, and we're looking at doing some more of this. And we talked about this before, but have you done any of that in recent years? Is that something? I know you've done a lot of it up in Alaska, but is that something you're still interested in?
Oh, definitely. That just never gets old, and Alaska would probably be the best place to really go for it. And last 2 or 3 trips to Alaska, I've gone to the same spot, the Aniak River, and they just have all season long mousing. So my last trip up there was the last season of the year. And, it's even after the kind of the egg season and then flesh season. And so you can still mouse through all of that. A lot of places, your guide will say, yeah, the mousing was good in the spring, but they're on the eggs. They're pretty selective to that. And that's what we're going to do. And then you bead fish, and that's fun. But on the Aniak, you can fish the mouse in the 3rd week of September.
Oh, wow. And is this Aniak, is that up near the Kamchatka and Keezerock and all that stuff?
Not exactly. It flows in to the Kuskokwim River, which is a giant river that ends up out by Bethel. So the Aniak has the claim to fame of being the northernmost river in North America for rainbow trout and the southernmost river in North America for sheefish. And so you really get kind of that Arctic mix. We cut 11 different species on a white woolly bugger. So you got, grayling, char, rainbows, and then all the salmon, and there's whitefish and pike, and then sheefish. And sheefish are really cool. They can be quite selective. They're mostly feeding on salmon fry and smolt. So, so sometimes you'll luck out and catch one on a white woolly bugger. Other times you have to have pretty neat, realistic bait fish patterns, and they can get big. They can get up to 40 inches or more. So, and it's a swing technique, and maybe swing with a little twitch, and then big surface boils. And, you fish after dinner, 11 o'clock p.m. to about 1 a.m. It's prime time. Yeah, it's in the lowest light of the day, and they really get on the grab. But that's really fun. That's a nice option to have. And so,
on that trip, are you going in there and doing a how are you getting in? Is that like a fly-in sort of thing, drop off, float in the river?
Well, you can do that, or you can just fly commercial all the way to the little village of Aniak, and then the only real outfitter or lodge up there is Antioch River Lodge. They'll pick you up, then you jet boat up to the lodge and gear up and start fishing, and primarily mouse fishing, if that's your thing. And then the sloughs have really good pike fishing. And then you got this after dinner she-fish fishing. So it's really a lot of fun stuff. And even some, fun dry fly fishing. I always take a 4-weight and just fish some typical Alaska dry flies, humpy, royal wolf, that sort of thing for grayling. And the grayling are big. So I think sort of a magic number with grayling is the same as smallmouth bass. About 19 inches is when your smallmouth bass is a big fish.
Yeah.
And it's also when you can call a grayling big. And a 19 to 20 inch grayling is a beautiful fish, and they're fun. They're just iconic fish of the North. And so between the mousing, throw in some pike, some dry fly grayling, and some she-fish, and then you've got some salmon around all the time. And
yeah,
I mean, that's just so much fun. And I know you've been going to Alaska, so
yeah,
it's just fun to have that mix of stuff, because we all love our tackle, and it's fun to have 5 fly boxes of everything from poppers and giant streamers to, little dry flies and everything in between.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, we're looking at going next year maybe, and we're kind of looking at that in kind of the July, trying to hit. The fish aren't as big, but I think overall in the rivers, I mean, you've got now is the Kamchatka, how far is that? That must be downriver from.
Yeah, it's down latitude down in Alaska, but yeah, it's another river that's got a lot of, it's got mouse fishing, it's got swinging for kings.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Have you done? I mean, have you up in Alaska? Have you done just a bunch of rivers, or do you always have a little set of rivers you kind of go back to, or you've gone back to?
I have fished a lot because in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, I was a sales rep. So I had Alaska in my territory, and that included all the fly shops, all the sporting goods stores, and lodges. And that's not just Bristol Bay. There's not a lot of retail out there, but I got to, to fish and work in Kodiak, Ketchikan, Fairbanks, going on the highway north of Anchorage towards Denali. And so I'd rent a car when I could. And, I just fish a day, work a day. And, you can fish after work till midnight. And at times I would take my little rental car all the way up to Fairbanks and see a couple fly shops up there. And then if I had a weekend or something, I'd just go north, and I would drive these dirt roads. I drove all the way to the Arctic Circle. And in fact, it was in a little town called Circle, Alaska on the Yukon River. And there were moose and bears, and it was really, really neat. So I got to know Alaska just for not having an airplane. I got to know it really, really well. And then some of the bigger lodges were good customers for, flies and with Sims or whoever I was working for at the time, Patagonia, Orvis, Scott, Scientific Anglers. So I had a good bunch of gear. And so, man, king salmon, knack, Dillingham.
Kings are pretty cool, swinging for kings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we're excited to get up on that and do some, get some king action. Seems like the coho is kind of, I don't know, it seems like the kings are kind of a whole nother level above like just stripping for coho.
Oh, yeah, the grab from a, 18-pound to 30-pound king, that first initial tug, it's right up there. It's not as exciting as maybe a tarpon take, but it's the power. And, like, what have I got? You don't know for a while. And it's that mystery of the 50-foot handshake out there just going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And like, whoa, boy, here we go.
Right. That is amazing. Nice. Okay. Well, this is, I'm glad we touched on that a little bit, the mousing. But would it be, if you just take us out, like with the mousing tip, what is your one? Somebody's got all the gear, got all the flies. What do you tell them? And they're sitting there trying to get them. Is it pretty easy, or are there any tips you really need to know?
No, I don't think it's too difficult. I think, like with a lot of other styles of fly fishing, moving is critical. I don't think you're going to talk a fish into eating a mouse on your 5th cast into the same spot.
Okay.
But, picking pockets, logs, log jams, keep moving, covering more water. And you sometimes find a spot, an eddy with a big log jam or something where there'll be a density of fish, maybe 8 or 10 fish in there. And so you can have some repetitive action that's great. A lot of times it's just one fish on one log, but Yeah, I'd say just moving, making good casts, twitching it around logs and overhanging branches and things like that. It's
Yep.
yeah,
That's it. Yeah, they're sitting around the wood, right?
yeah. Most people just don't move a lot. I think just covering water, being more physical, wading across back channels, fishing little lagoons back in the the boonies, and it's just love that stuff.
Yeah, I love it. Nice. Well, we'll I guess you got probably this we're going into like November, December now. Are you looking, you got a trip with like 11 angling coming up sometime this winter, or what's that look like?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, I'll be heading down to Cedar Lodge, South Island, New Zealand. It's been closed for 2 years because of COVID,
wow.
so we've got to get that place all going. It's super neat. It's a helicopter fly out every day to the most beautiful places ever, and then I'll host a magazine. I'm hosting a magazine writer down there with Gray Sporting Journal, and then then later in the year, we have 3 lodges in Chile, so we've got, there's work to do, and then part of that is fishing and having fun. So it's a great way to do it all.
Amazing. All right, Brian. Well, until we get on the next one here, we'll send everybody out Brian O'Keefe photography.com, or they can connect with you at 11 Angling. And this has been good to catch up with you. Definitely always fun to hear where you're heading next, and definitely look forward to catching up with you, hopefully on the water sometime.
Well, Dave, that would just be great. Because in high school I fished. You're in Nehalem, Oregon, right?
Yep.
So the Nehalem was kind of my home river. I could get out of school at 1:00 as a senior.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and I'd run over. I fished that whole Nehalem, knew it like the back of my hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
so what high school did you go to?
Well, my senior year was in Lincoln High School, downtown Portland. My mother taught at Portland State University, so we spent a year there, or I did, and then I went off to New Zealand after that. But it's a beautiful part of the world, and Nehalem hasn't, really changed a whole lot over the years.
Still tiny.
And you can go crabbing in the bay and up and down, to really cool rivers.
Yeah, it's a good, for all that. I mean, definitely lots of fishing, and steelhead, of course, is the big thing, one of the big things. But this is good, Brian. Well, thanks again for taking the time today, and looking forward to catching up with you on the next one.
All right, Dave. I really appreciate it. It's always fun talking to you.
So there you go. wetflyswing.com/382. 382 is going to get you a few of those bonuses we always talk about. I know there's going to be a video or two in there. You can check that out right now. As we get into the holiday season, a good way to get a good stocking stuffer or present is to check out some of our sponsors and see what they have at their websites. Anybody we talked about today, it's a good chance, or you can go over to wetflyswing.com/sponsors and check it out right there and support them during the holiday season, and you support us and we support your journey through all the content that we're going to be putting out here. And we are going to be doubling down next year. Would definitely love to hear if you've got something we've been missing or something you want to hear us go back into a little bit deeper. Send me a message anytime, Dave at wetflyswing, and then wetflyswing on social. Would love to hear from you if you get a chance, and we can take it from there. We are setting up and planning some really cool trips this year, so I'm excited to connect with a few people on the water. This year we've got a couple of saltwater trips we're going to be checking in on early this coming year. So if you have a saltwater trip, something you've been thinking about doing, I know I've talked to a few people out there that have said, there's a number of those bucket list trips that we always talk about, Belize, Bahamas, some of these places, the Grand Slam, that would definitely be nice. So Tarpon, I think Tarpon is definitely going to be crazy. So let's do this. I'm going to get out of here because we're going to get this off to Dom, and we're going to get off to the next one. And I want to get on the water with you. But if you get a chance, you can check with me online as well if we can't connect on a trip on the water anywhere. And I hope you are having a good evening, a great morning, or if it's afternoon, I hope you're having a great afternoon, and I hope you have a good day. Looking forward to catching up with you soon, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.